A beautiful German couple traveled to an island in French Polynesia. Only one would leave alive. Was cannibalism involved in the murder? Hello, my name is Holly, and this is The Murder She Shed, the place we discuss the dead right from my she shed. We discuss rarely heard true crime cases, so if you enjoy a bit of grime with your true crime, make sure to make that subscribe button chime. So enough of my bad rhymes before we run out of time. Let's get started. Nuku Hiva is known as the largest island in French Polynesia. Nuku Hiva boasts a lush landscape filled with greenery, sandy coastlines, bays, and valleys. Herman Melville, who wrote the novel Moby Dick, also wrote a book that discussed his visit to Nuku Hiva and the cannibalistic tribe on the island. There were frequent wars between tribes where the slain victims were eaten as an act of revenge. Warriors hung the skulls of victims from their loincloths. An English castaway in the 19th century wrote that the islanders will entice you from your boat with their young women who will lead you from the beach into the bush. There you get murdered and the boat becomes their prize. The practice of cannibalism ended somewhere between the 19th and 20th century. But in 2011, there was a murder that brought a wave of attention back to the cannibalistic roots of Nuku Hiva. Stefan Rahman and Heike Dorsch had been sailing for 3 years, traveling around the world. The couple loved the excitement of adventures. They currently had been sailing 17 days without seeing land when they finally made it to the Marquises Island. They are the largest group of islands in French Polynesia. The couple didn't want to visit touristy places. For the entire trip, they had pursued a version of paradise that is revered by people who consider themselves travelers rather than tourists. They wanted to learn the culture, get to know the people, and make friends along the way. Stefan and Heike were enjoying their trip so much that they stayed there 6 weeks, which was longer than they had planned. They had done everything the island had to offer. They went spearfishing, played volleyball, and had beach bonfires with the islanders. They got lessons in traditional drumming and were invited to home-cooked meals. Last on the list for Stefan was a goat hunt, which is a traditional island pastime. The first time he attempted the goat hunt, the guide didn't show up to take him. The second time, the guide's GUN jammed. While visiting Nuku Hiva, they ran into a man leading a horse down a trail that they had been following. They stopped to chat with him. He introduced himself, saying his name was Arahano Haiti, but he preferred to be called Henry. He was built like a football player, thick, tattooed, and more than 6 feet tall. He was a nice-looking man and seemed super friendly. The next day, Stefan and Heike decided to hike to the waterfalls, which is one of the tallest waterfalls in French Polynesia. When returning, they went into the village, where they happened to run into Henry again. Stefan asked Henry to take him on a goat hunt, since the last 2 times were failed attempts. Henry agreed, and Stefan asked if he should bring along his GUN. Henry said that wouldn't be necessary. A couple of hours later, Henry stood at the edge of the beach and whistled toward Stefan's boat, and then he and Stefan set off. Heike stayed on the boat to wait for them to get back so they could set sail as soon as they were back. But after hours slipped by and it was getting dark, Heike started getting worried. Then she heard a voice from the darkness and looked over to see Henry on a dinghy. She said, "Where's Stephen?" And in his broken English, he said, "Injured, accident, forest." She quickly jumped into the dinghy, where he paddled them to the beach. Heike was shaking all the way to the beach. Then they jumped off the dinghy and ran into the forest. They walked about 15 minutes in silence. Heike began to panic more with every step. Suddenly, the path they were on ended, and she looked at Henry and said, "Where is Stephen?" He said, "I don't remember where I put him." She really started freaking out at this point and said, "You don't remember? You idiot! How could that be?" After feeling very frustrated, she said to Henry, "I'm going to get help," and turned and started running back, yelling Stephen's name. As she went down the path, it was so dark now she could no longer see the path. So she stopped to try to just figure out where she was at. She felt a presence behind her. So she slowly turned to see a GUN pointed at her head. Henry eerily looked into her eyes and said, "You die now." Bravely, Heike shouted no and grabbed the GUN barrel with her left hand. The two then wrestled, and she ended up face down with him on her back. Her fear for Stephen had outweighed her fear for herself. He grabbed a fistful of her long blonde hair and used it as a handle to bang her head on the forest floor. Heike managed to get her right hand on the trigger of the GUN, but the safety was on and the GUN wouldn't fire. Henry began choking her, and she felt like she was going to lose consciousness. And at that moment, she thought to herself, "I've lived my life. I've lived my dream. And if it's time, it's time." Suddenly, Henry released her neck, and she gasped for air. He then started reaching up her shirt and down her pants while grinding against her. She could feel his hot breath on her, and she felt sick. Heike was now breathing so rapidly that she grew dizzy and thought that she was going to faint. Henry became oddly gentle. "Breathe deeply," he said. He held a bottle of water to her lips and told her to drink. As Heike's body calmed, she tried to reason with him. "You are a good man," she said. "You aren't like this. If you want money, go to our boat. We have a lot of cash on board." Henry didn't respond. He told her sit down with her back to a tree, where he tied her neck to the trunk and her arms behind it. She felt like he was going to decapitate her with the machete, but Henry didn't swing the blade. Instead, he stuck his sweaty t-shirt in her mouth and walked off on the trail towards the beach. Heike began tugging at the ropes as soon as Henry had gone. Even though there was a full moon, it was still hard to see what she needed to do to get free. During her struggle to get free, she had not even noticed that Henry had come back. He started yelling and made a slashing motion across his throat. She feared this was it when he bent down towards her, but he only cinched her ropes tighter and then walked off again. This time Heike waited a few minutes, then she twisted around, maneuvered her right hand loose, and untied the ropes. She was suddenly free. She took a few steps, but every step sounded like it echoed in the air, since she was stepping on dried leaves and twigs. She stopped, scared that Henry had heard her movements. Suddenly, she saw the beams of a flashlight coming through the trees. She began to run as fast as she could. Branches slashed her skin. She lost one shoe, then the other. Thorns pierced her feet. She could feel no pain, only the thought of getting away from this evil man that followed her. and knowing in her heart that Stephen was no longer alive. She heard Henry gaining ground and thought, "This is it. I am going to die." Suddenly she smelt citrus, and it brought back a memory from the day before when her and Stephen picked limes at the edge of the forest. She felt as if Stephen was speaking for her to follow the smell of the limes. She broke through the forest into the moonlit beach. She ran towards the water, but she feared going to her boat because she knew that would be the first place that Henry would look for her. A second boat had dropped anchor in the bay that afternoon, and Heike knew the owners. She decided to swim for it, but it was further away than it even looked. She knew the bay was full of sharks, and due to the thorns, she was bleeding pretty bad. But she had to chance it. This was her only hope. Every stroke in the dark water, she feared she would be grabbed and pulled under by a shark's powerful jaws. She was tired and running out of energy quickly, but suddenly she heard a voice calling her name. She had found the second boat. She knew at that moment she was safe as they pulled her from the shark-infested water. 2 hours later, the military police showed up on the island and searched for Henry and Stephen. They searched for 3 days to no avail, finding 0 signs of either man. On the 4th day, she was summoned to the military police office, where she was told the most horrific news she could imagine. They said, "We found a campfire that is 3 times bigger than a normal hunter's fire." They told her there are human remains in the ashes, and we believe they are Stephen's. The police pursued Henry for weeks, and they found out that Henry was getting food and other supplies from the villagers. He dodged soldiers who had him in their GUN sights and ducked beneath the surface of a river, breathing through a hollow reed. They never could catch him. Instead, after 7 weeks, he got tired of all the running and just turned himself in. He admitted to killing Stephen, but his excuse would come as a shock, which Heike never believed. He said that Stephen had RAP'd him, and so he shot him in self-defense. After an investigation, the judge could find no evidence of homosexuality or violence in Stephen's background. Henry was asked to do a reconstruction of the hunt, and so just 5 months after her boyfriend's death, Heike found herself setting off into the jungle with lawyers, a dozen commandos, and Henry himself. That took some bravery to face him again and listen to the account of her boyfriend's murder. The account that Henry gave at the reconstruction was that during the hunt, Stephen had stopped to check out a small waterfall, while Henry built a smoky fire to ward off mosquitoes. Stephen returned and offered him some alcohol, and Henry began to feel woozy. Though Stephen was considerably shorter and lighter than Henry, Stephen was somehow able to wrestle the rifle away from him. He tied one of Henry's legs high up to the tree, one-handedly without ever putting the GUN down. Then Stephen RAP'd Henry, who had passed out. Henry said that when he came to, he slipped out of the ropes and grabbed the GUN, which Stephen had carelessly left on the ground. Henry, terrified of what might happen next, shot Stephen, who then, quite conveniently, fell to the ground, rolled into the campfire, and burned up. He then said what he had done to Heike was him just play acting and trying to show her what Stephen had done to him because of the communication barrier. He couldn't tell her. This was the story he told in which his own lawyer had doubts. It was later found out that Henry was unemployed, had recently been dumped by his girlfriend, and had to move back in with his father. It was said that his father had severely beat him when he was younger. They would find out that Henry was bisexual but kept it from his father because he had felt shame about it. He knew his father, as a church elder, would not approve. The experts speculated that he might have made a pass at Stephen or a sexual suggestion, but was rebuffed. Given his hidden homosexuality, any rejection would have evoked a great deal of anger and shame in Henry, overwhelmed by these emotions. The theory goes Henry killed Stephen. During the reconstruction, Heike asked Henry, "Did Stephen say anything before you killed him?" But Henry only responded that Stephen had been quiet. Henry said he could tell that the German was afraid to die because he noticed a little spot at the base of Stephen's neck pulsing in and out. This intimacy chilled Heike. She knew that when Stephen was anxious, that tiny spot did indeed flutter. This meant that before Henry shot him, he was close enough to see that spot, and also that he took some seconds before he fired. Because of the history of the island, and only Stephen's teeth and a few bones were found in the fire, it was rumored that Henry had cannibalized him, but that never was proven, although the media went with it as their headlines because it just made for a bigger story. Heike still travels to this day, and it did not keep her from socializing with people when she travels. She's just more cautious now. Well, guys, glad you could join me today for this true crime adventure. Hope you have a blessed weekend and see you next time on the Murder She Said. Bye. Leads you from the beach into the bush. There you get murdered. The couple love the excitement of adventure. Who doesn't? The statement is that. No, we all love boring lives. Embarrassing. But my brother literally put, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but those dog collars that track your dog. He literally put one of those on me because we were in the Rocky Mountains and he thought I'd die if I got lost. And so, of course, I did get lost. And he tracked me down. So embarrassing. Embarrassing. He got the four-wheeler. He seen where I was going to come out. I was actually fixing to come out into a road, but it was like miles away from camp. Yes, I was by myself. I'm stupid and I do these things. Bears and mountain lions are. And I was miles away from camp, but he seen where I was fixing to come out, so he took the four-wheeler down and caught me as I came out. I am so glad to see my brother. I've never been so glad to see him in my entire life. But hey, guys, it saved me from starvation. I do know what things are that are, edible if I do get lost. I guess that's a plus in my behalf. I don't know why that story went there, but you now know I wore a dog collar. Oh, there went my mic. Nice job there. My mic was that. You knocked it. You broke it, I think. Oh, God. Too much love. Bye. See y'all. Love y'all.